This small village, situated in the heart of a dense forest, has been the scene of legends and haunting stories for generations. The most famous of these is the legend of the werewolf, a feared creature that, according to reports, emerges during the nights of the full moon, spreading terror and death among the inhabitants. The dark village is surrounded by an ancient forest, where the tall trees and deep shadows hide secrets that few dare to explore. The air is heavy and charged with mystery, especially at night, when the distant howls of wild animals seem to echo the ancient stories told by the ancients. It is in this scenario that our story begins, in a time where the legend of the werewolf is about to become a terrifying reality for the residents. Some say that the werewolf curse began centuries ago, when a villager made a pact with dark forces in exchange for power and revenge. Since then, the creature has been condemned to wander the forest, transforming with each full moon cycle. The attacks are sporadic, but always brutal, leaving trails of destruction and fear. In recent months, however, something has changed. The attacks have become more frequent and violent, bringing the village to a state of constant alert. Residents live in fear, avoiding leaving their homes after dark and always keeping doors and windows locked. Mutilated animals are found on the edges of the forest, and the disappearance of some villagers only increases the panic. It is in this desperate environment that Jonas, a determined young researcher, arrives at Villa Sombria. He heard the rumors about the curse and decided to uncover the truth behind the legend, believing there is a rational explanation for the terrifying events. Jonas begins to explore the village and talk to the residents, trying to piece together this dark puzzle. He meets Marta, a brave and determined young local woman, who lost her brother in one of the recent attacks. Marta, driven by pain and the desire for revenge, decides to help Jonas in his investigation. Together, they begin to unearth ancient secrets and connect the dots between the attacks and the werewolf legend. Little by little, Jonas and Marta realize that the werewolf curse may be more real than they imagined. They find clues that point to the existence of a supernatural creature, and the witness accounts are disturbingly consistent. Each step in the investigation brings them closer to the truth, but also increases the danger they face. Tension in the village grows, and distrust spreads among the villagers, who begin to suspect each other. And so, Villa Sombria prepares for another full moon night. The fear is palpable, and the feeling that something terrible is about to happen is almost unbearable. Jonas and Marta know they need to act quickly, but what they still don't know is that the true origin of the curse is closer than they imagine, and the truth they will discover will change everything forever. What will be revealed in the depths of the forest? And who really is the werewolf that terrorizes the dark village? The answer is hidden in the shadows, waiting to be discovered. Jonas arrived at the dark village with unshakable determination and fervent curiosity. He was an experienced investigator, known for his ability to unravel seemingly insoluble mysteries. From a young age, Jonas was attracted to supernatural stories, always believing that behind every legend there was a truth waiting to be discovered. With his notebook in hand and a map of the region, he began to explore the village, determined to find answers. Right from the start, Jonas realized that the Villa Sombria was surrounded by an atmosphere of distrust and fear. People avoided talking about the werewolf's attacks, as if they feared attracting the creature's wrath just by mentioning its name. However, there was one person who seemed different. Marta, a young local woman, exuded a fierce determination, unlike the dread that gripped the other villagers. Marta was a well-known figure in the village. The daughter of an experienced hunter, she grew up hearing stories about the werewolf curse and, more recently, experiencing the terror of the attacks firsthand. Her brother, Thomas, had disappeared one night with a full moon, and Marta's desperation to find answers had made her an unexpected ally to Jonas. She was brave and resilient, driven by the pain of loss and the need for justice. When Jonas and Marta met, there was an immediate mutual understanding. Marta saw in Jonas a chance to unravel the mystery that was plaguing the village, while Jonas found in Marta a valuable ally, with intimate knowledge of the place and its inhabitants. Together, they began investigating, visiting sites of recent attacks and talking to those who dared to share their experiences. One of the first to speak was the village elder, Mr. Harold, whose memory bore the scars of many full moons. Sitting in his rocking chair, he told Jonas and Marta about the ancient stories of the curse. According to Harold, legend said that the first werewolf appeared after a dark pact made by a villager desperate for revenge. Since then, the curse passed from generation to generation, choosing a new host each cycle. The villagers' accounts were disturbingly consistent. Many spoke of a tall, hairy creature with glowing red eyes that appeared from the shadows and disappeared as quickly as it appeared. One night, Jonas and Marta decided to watch the forest, armed with flashlights and courage. As they walked along the dark trails, the silence of the forest was interrupted only by the distant sound of breaking branches and a skin-crawling howl. Marta revealed to Jonas an important discovery. Her father, before mysteriously disappearing years ago, mentioned an old diary hidden in the family library. They rushed to Marta's house, where they found the dusty diary, full of notes about the curse. The diary described a pattern in attacks, suggesting the werewolf followed a specific route through the forest. As Jonas read the notes, an idea began to form. Maybe the werewolf wasn't a random monster, but someone from the village itself, cursed to transform on full moon nights. Marta, although frightened by the possibility, knew that the only way to protect her village and honor her brother's memory was to discover the truth, no matter how painful it was. With clues from the diary and renewed courage, Jonas and Marta prepared to face the next full moon. They decided they needed more information and went back to talking to the villagers. During these conversations, they met Sarah, an elderly woman who had a lesser-known view of the legend. According to her, there was an ancient ritual, a way to reveal the werewolf's true identity. The ritual, however, was dangerous and required a sacrifice. Jonas and Marta were willing to risk everything. As the next full moon approached, they prepared to perform the ritual, aware that the truth could be more terrible than they imagined. The tension in the village reached its peak, and the line between myth and reality began to blur. The night of revelation was coming, and with it, the truth that could free the dark village from its curse, or condemn it forever. The full moon was about to rise over the horizon, and the atmosphere in the dark village was filled with tension and fear. Jonas and Marta knew that the night would bring more than just darkness, it would also bring the terrifying presence of the werewolf. Armed with Marta's father's diary and the knowledge of the ritual revealed by Sarah, they prepared to face the creature and discover its true identity. The first signs of the werewolf's presence began to appear as soon as the sun set. The forest around the village grew restless, the animals seemed to sense the approach of danger, and the distant howls became more frequent and frightening. The villagers, fearing for their lives, locked themselves in their homes, leaving the streets deserted and silent except for the occasional snapping of branches and leaves moved by the wind. Jonas and Marta decided to patrol the forest, following the pattern of attacks described in the diary. Walking carefully, with flashlights in hand, they heard the whispers of the wind and the heavy footsteps that seemed to echo around them. Every sound made them stop and look around, hoping to find the creature they feared so much. The tension was palpable, and each moment seemed to stretch indefinitely. It was then that they found the first concrete signs, huge, fresh footprints in the damp forest floor, deep marks that no ordinary creature could leave. Following the footprints, they came to a clearing illuminated by the silver light of the full moon. In the center of the clearing, the shadow of the werewolf moved, a tall, imposing figure with eyes that glowed red like embers. The sight of the creature was terrifying, but Jonas and Marta knew they could not retreat. Remembering Sarah's instructions, Marta prepared the items needed for the ritual while Jonas kept his eyes fixed on the werewolf. With a circle of salt around the clearing and candles arranged in a specific pattern, Marta began to chant the words of the ancient incantation. The creature, sensing the threat, released a deafening howl and charged towards them. Jonas, with renewed courage, brandished a torch in an attempt to fend off the werewolf and buy time. While the werewolf hesitated, torn between attacking and retreating, Marta completed the ritual. An intense light emanated from the circle, enveloping the creature in an unearthly glow. The werewolf struggled against the invisible force that held him, but slowly began to transform. The monstrous form gave way to a human figure, fallen on his knees in the center of the clearing. When the light finally dissipated, Jonas and Marta approached cautiously. To their shock, the village elder, Mr. Harold, was on the ground, panting and covered in sweat. He looked at Jonas and Marta with eyes full of sadness and resignation. "The curse was always mine to bear," he said weakly. "I made the pact many years ago, thinking I could control the power, but I was wrong. Every full moon, the creature inside me took control." The revelation left Jonas and Marta speechless. The elder they respected and who had told so many stories about the curse was, in fact, the source of the terror itself. With tears in his eyes, Harold explained that he had tried to protect the village by keeping it secret, but the attacks had become uncontrollable. "There is only one way to end this," he whispered. "A sacrifice must be made." The decision Jonas and Marta now faced was impossible. To save the village, they would have to make a sacrifice that no one was willing to accept. The fate of the dark village was in their hands, and any choice would have devastating consequences. In the next episode, we will follow Jonas and Marta as they face the repercussions of this revelation and decide the fate of the elder and the village, with the curse still looming like a looming shadow. Jonas and Marta were paralyzed by Mr. Harold's revelation. The truth was more terrible than they could have imagined, and the weight of the coming decision was crushing. With the clearing lit only by the flickering candlelight, time seemed suspended, and the responsibility of saving the village now fell completely upon them. Determined to find a solution that didn't involve human sacrifice, Jonas and Marta took Harold back to the village. They knew they needed more information, something that could break the curse without spilling more blood. Marta's father's diary was their best hope, so they returned to Marta's home library to look through it once more. As they leafed through the old, worn pages, they found a note that they had overlooked before. The diary mentioned an ancient cave deep in the forest, where the original pact was said to have been sealed. According to the note, the cave contained a mystical artifact that could reverse the curse if used correctly. This was his last hope. Jonas, Marta and Harold, despite their weakened condition, prepared for the journey to the cave. The forest was darker than ever, and every step seemed imbued with a sense of urgency and danger. When they reached the cave entrance, they felt an oppressive presence, as if the place itself was alive and aware of their intentions. The cave was a maze of narrow tunnels and dark chambers. With torches in hand, they advanced cautiously, alert for any sign of danger. Deep in the cave, they found a larger chamber, lit by a strange glow emanating from a pedestal in the center. On the pedestal rested an ancient amulet, encrusted with precious stones that reflected the light in a mesmerizing way. Mr. Harold, although weak, recognized the amulet immediately. He explained that that artifact was the key to breaking the curse, but that the process would be risky and painful. To reverse the curse, Harold would have to use the amulet to extract the creature from within him, but the effort could cost him his life. Jonas and Marta realized that, despite their intentions of avoiding a sacrifice, there might be no other way out. With the decision made, Mr. Harold held the amulet and began to sing an ancient song, while Jonas and Marta watched with heavy hearts. The amulet began to glow brightly, and an invisible force seemed to pull the werewolf essence out of Harold. He screamed in pain, but continued the chant, determined to free the village from the curse. The shape of the werewolf materialized in the chamber, a monstrous shadow that fought against the light of the amulet. With one last scream, Harold channeled all his strength into the amulet, and the werewolf's shadow was sucked into it. The intense glow abruptly ceased, leaving the cave in complete silence. Mr. Harold fell to the ground, exhausted and mortally wounded. Jonas and Marta ran to help him, but he knew his time was running out. With one last sigh, he smiled at them, thanking them for giving him the chance to redeem himself. Harold's sacrifice was not in vain. The curse was broken, and the oppressive presence that hung over the village began to dissipate. Jonas and Marta left the cave with the amulet, feeling a mixture of relief and sadness. Dawn brought new hope to Dark Town, but also a reminder of the price that was paid for freedom. In the village, villagers began to notice the change. The attacks stopped, and the feeling of fear gradually gave way to renewed hope. Jonas and Marta were seen as heroes, but they knew that the real heroine was Mr. Harold, who finally found peace by freeing himself from the curse he had carried for so long. However, upon returning to Marta's house, Jonas found one last entry in his father's diary, an entry that left them uneasy. It seemed to suggest that the curse could be passed on if the amulet was not properly destroyed. With the amulet still in hand, Jonas and Marta knew that their journey was not yet over. They needed to ensure the curse didn't return, and that meant facing a new set of challenges. The discovery of the final entry in Marta's father's diary brought new urgency to Jonas and Marta's mission. The suggestion that the curse could be passed on if the amulet was not destroyed properly put them on alert. They knew that the dark village would not be completely safe until the amulet was destroyed once and for all. So they began to plan their next action. The note indicated that the only place where the amulet could be destroyed was an ancient temple hidden in the mountains, a place shrouded in mystery and fraught with danger. The temple, according to the diary, contained a sacred altar capable of destroying the amulet and dispelling any trace of the curse. Jonas and Marta prepared for the difficult journey, aware of the challenges they would face. The journey to the temple was long and treacherous. The pair departed at dawn, leaving the dark village still shrouded in a melancholic silence after recent events. The forest that surrounded the village gave way to rocky, steep terrain as they climbed the mountains. The temperature dropped, and the path became increasingly arduous. Jonas and Marta moved forward with determination, driven by the desire to protect the village and honor Harold's sacrifice. After days of travel, they finally saw the entrance to the temple, an ancient structure carved into the rock of the mountain. The temple looked like it had been abandoned for centuries, its walls covered in moss and inscriptions weathered by time. As they entered, they were greeted by a sense of ancient power, as if the place held long-forgotten secrets. Torchlight flickered on the stone walls, revealing mystical symbols and guardian statues carved in stone. The interior of the temple was a maze of dark corridors and hidden chambers. Jonas and Marta advanced cautiously, alert for any sign of danger. The silence was oppressive, and the only sound they heard was the echo of their own footsteps. After exploring several paths, they found a large central chamber, where a stone altar stood in the middle of the room. The altar, covered in ancient runes, seemed to pulse with an energy of its own. Marta took the amulet and approached the altar. She felt a palpable resistance in the air, as if an invisible force was trying to stop her from destroying the object. Jonas followed her closely, ready for any eventuality. Marta placed the amulet on the altar and began to recite the words found in her father's diary. The chamber was filled with an intense glow and increasing vibration, and the air seemed to vibrate with a potent energy. Suddenly, a shadow began to form in the air around the altar. It was the essence of the werewolf, fighting to survive, even after Harold's death. The shadow took the form of a creature, with burning eyes and sharp claws. Jonas and Marta prepared for the final confrontation, knowing that the amulet's destruction was near. The battle that followed was intense and desperate. The shadow attacked with an animalistic fury, trying to protect the amulet that contained its essence. Jonas fought bravely, using the torch to fend off the creature, while Marta continued to recite the magic words. Each blow seemed to weaken the shadow, but it also drained Jonas and Marta of their strength. Finally, with a final scream, Marta spoke the final words of the incantation, and the amulet began to crack. The shadow let out a deafening howl as it dissolved into a cloud of darkness. The amulet exploded in blinding light, and the chamber was filled with sepulchral silence. Jonas and Marta fell to the ground, exhausted but victorious. When the dust settled, they realized that the shadow had completely disappeared and the amulet was in pieces. The oppressive energy that permeated the temple was also gone, leaving a feeling of peace and stillness. They had managed to destroy the amulet and, with it, the curse that tormented the dark village. Jonas and Marta returned to the village as heroes. The villagers, upon learning of the mission's success, celebrated the finally achieved freedom. The dark village began to recover, and the werewolf's shadow became just a distant memory. However, Jonas and Marta knew that the true price of freedom was Harold's sacrifice, and they would never forget what he did for everyone. The story of the Dark Village and the werewolf has become a legend told from generation to generation, a reminder of the terror that once plagued the village and the courage of those who faced the darkness. Life in the village returned to normal, but Jonas and Marta knew that their lives had been changed forever by this journey of horror and heroism. The Dark Village, now free from the werewolf curse, began to flourish in a new light of hope. However, the peace that reigned did not erase the traumas and scars left by recent events. Jonas and Marta, heroes in the eyes of the villagers, realized there was more to be done to ensure history never repeated itself. They committed themselves to deeply studying the village's history and ancient curses to prevent new terrors from emerging. With the help of Marta's father's diary and Mr. Harold's detailed memories, Jonas and Marta decided to compile a comprehensive record of all the supernatural events that plagued the village. They wanted to create a guide that could serve future generations, ensuring that knowledge about these threats remained alive and accessible. The painstaking work of cataloging legends, rituals, and methods of protection took over their lives. While organizing these records, Jonas discovered an ancient map hidden in the pages of the diary. The map seemed to point to several locations around the Dark Village that had been centers of supernatural activity over the centuries. Intrigued, they decided to investigate these sites, believing they could contain relics or valuable information about other possible threats. The first location marked on the map took them to a hill north of the village, where ruins of an ancient fortress waited to be explored. The fortress, built centuries before, was now a shadow of its former glory, overgrown with vegetation and partially destroyed by time. Within its walls, Jonas and Marta found inscriptions and symbols they recognized from the diary's writings. It appeared that the fortress had been a focal point for supernatural activity and held as yet unrevealed secrets. As they explored the dark corridors and ruined halls, they discovered an underground chamber hidden beneath a stone floor. In the chamber, they found an altar similar to the one in the mountain temple, but much older and worn out. There were inscriptions that mentioned an ancient order of guardians, whose duty was to protect the village from evil forces. These guardians, according to inscriptions, kept a series of magical artifacts that could be used to combat different types of curses. Among the artifacts, Jonas and Marta found an old book, bound in leather and full of forgotten spells and rituals. The book seemed to contain the accumulated knowledge of generations of guardians, offering new hope for the continued protection of the Dark Village. They realized that guardians had been an essential line of defense against the supernatural, and that, somehow, this tradition had been lost over time. Determined to restore order to the guardians, Jonas and Marta decided to share their discoveries with the villagers. They organized meetings in the village square, explaining the importance of knowing and respecting the past to protect the future. Although initially skeptical, the villagers began to understand the gravity of the situation and the importance of being prepared. Many volunteered to train and learn the rituals described in the Book of Guardians. The Dark Village began to transform again, this time into a vigilant and well-informed community. Jonas and Marta led the restoration of the ancient fortress, converting it into a training center and a place of refuge in case of future attacks. The spirit of unity and collaboration took over the village, and the shadow of fear that once enveloped it was replaced by a sense of purpose and determination. During this period, Jonas and Marta also delved into their own personal stories, realizing that their lives were irrevocably intertwined with the village and its legends. Marta, inspired by her father's sacrifice and Mr. Harold's courage, decided to dedicate her life to protecting the village. Jonas, with his investigative spirit and desire to unravel mysteries, found a new purpose in his partnership with Marta and in leading the new guardians. However, in the back of their minds, they knew there was still a lot to discover. The last journal entry mentioned a number of locations that had yet to be explored, suggesting that the werewolf curse was just one of many potentially dormant threats in the region. The Dark Village may be free of a curse, but the surrounding mountains and forests still hold dark secrets and unknown dangers. The story of Jonas and Marta, therefore, did not end there. Instead, it paved the way for a new era of surveillance and discovery. The next chapter of the Dark Village would be marked by constant preparation and the determination to maintain the peace won at such a high price. Jonas and Marta's commitment to protecting the village and uncovering its supernatural secrets ensured that, as long as they were present, the Dark Village would always be ready to face any darkness that loomed on the horizon. Thus, Jonas and Marta's continuous journey through the shadows and mysteries of Villa Sombria promised new adventures and challenges, keeping alive the spirit and courage that defined their struggles until now. The true battle against the supernatural was just beginning, and Mr. Harold's story of courage and sacrifice would become a lasting inspiration to all who faced the darkness.